like to call Phelim and Duncan back up as well here, and we'll ask them a few questions. A really easy one for Phelim here to begin with. What price will beef be next year, and will it be influenced by the Mercosur agreement? Or maybe I should say, will it be up or down, and just let you say up or down?
I suppose the first response there, Norman, would be there'll be a lot more people in this room better qualified than me to answer that. And I would even hazard a guess that they couldn't do that. The reality is, last year there were a number of things that very much fell in the farmers' favour. We had a very robust demand for proteins, for beef, all the way through the year. There was some bit of a slag as the year end as the higher prices fed through at a retail level. So there was fairly robust demand, but even more importantly, there was a serious deficit in supply across, as I say, the Northern Hemisphere, not just UK, Ireland, Europe, but also North America. So that created the perfect situation, tight supply, rising prices. Now, it's unlikely that we will achieve the same level of increase in 2026 that we did in 2025. It'd be nice to hold on to it if we could. But the truth of the matter is, it's an impossible question to say where we'll get to. The one thing that is pretty certain, there's no major increase in supply coming into the system over the course of the coming year. So that means that the processing industry will effectively be chasing cattle for most of the year, although there will be gaps, there will be peaks and troughs. But there's no major surplus of supply coming into the system. I don't think we're going to see a flood of beef imports. We may see an increase in it. So that should keep a fairly decent floor under farm gate prices.
Thank you. That's good news. A question for Duncan then. How did you fund the growth in your herd since 2016?
With great difficulty. So one thing I didn't mention is for probably around 7 or 8 years I had a fencing business as well that I worked off farm on. So that did help in terms of cash flow, and again it further emphasised how easy I needed the herd to be because I was away full time. I effectively had a full-time fencing business and I ran the cow herd in my spare time. Eventually, as the herd grew, the sort of ratio changed over time, but yeah, with great difficulty, to be honest. But thankfully, I think we've built a profitable herd, a profitable business. And I think the need for cash flow, the need for working capital constantly just further emphasises how important it is for the herd to be productive. There wasn't a great nest egg that funded the whole thing. It's pretty much self-funded with a little bit of an additional income from the fencing business. So yeah, that's basically how it's done.
Just a slight follow-up on that. Do you have any extra labour in the farm, or just yourself and Claire?
There's myself, and we've got one full-time member of staff. Claire's involved, but she also works off farm, and obviously with 2 little kids, it's not so easy. So just the 2 of us.
And a question then on mycoplasma. Basically, could you vaccinate cows pre-calving and get cover in the calves? And secondly, would that have any effect on the calves when they've been weaned?
So vaccinating the cows pre-calving is still not going to be enough for the calves, and I'm just conscious it was a kind of beef to dairy viewpoint here, so you're probably purchasing the calves is what I thought. The vaccinating the cows pre-calving can potentially have some help. It's off-label for that particular aspect of it, but regardless, vaccinating your calf is essential. Vaccinating the calves as calves will have a big benefit for them as weanlings later on. It's reducing your risk of disease at that point in time, if that's what the question meant.
I think so, yeah. And another one for you, just availability of antibiotics is becoming an issue. We start with a lower quality antibiotic first, then moving to a stronger one. Is this the right approach?
So the right approach is not needing antibiotics and trying to get there, but there's going to be certain points where we need it. So when I go in and when you go into your farm and you need an antibiotic, absolutely, you start with the most appropriate one. So starting with, we've categorised antibiotics A through D. So categorising your antibiotics is important. We're encouraged to use more of our D and C category antibiotics. We don't utilise the A. They're kind of pretty much reserved for humans for the most part, and we use as little of the B category as possible. However, very often I will go straight from a D category to a C. I won't use the D, depending on the disease we're dealing with. So yes, using the lower category antibiotics is important. Using an appropriate antibiotic is very important, but I look at adding something to the mix, and that's an immune support product potentially. There's some really good algae-based products or phytogenics to try and boost the immune system, so you get better results. And longer term need less antibiotics, because antibiotic availability is not going to go away, that problem. It seems to be a consistent problem.
And one for Phelim then. How could the reduction in milk price impact the global supply of beef if there is an increase in culling in the dairy herd?
That is a difficult one, because the reality is, I think, again, very much in our part of the world here anyway, that there's been an increasing proportion of the beef has originated in the dairy herd. I suppose dairy prices, they do tend to fluctuate, and they have been going through a particular trough over the last number of weeks, indeed even stretching into months at this stage. And I don't think there's much hope for a major improvement anytime soon there. But, the dairy production very often, it is seen as transient. It does get through to the other side as global production falls back in. And remember, dairy is one of the most globally traded products of all, it and pig meat. And, if production, eventually less feed will mean less production in the US, in New Zealand, and across mainland Europe as well. So I don't think that we're going to see a massive cull of dairy cows in 2026. So therefore, I think, whilst there may be some shrinkage, I don't expect a huge shrinkage in it. And I'll also be watching with interest, I know there's a long lead-in period, but it'll be interesting to see if the increased and higher beef price of 2025 translates into more cows being bred in the suckler herd, and maybe a bit of a reversal of the decline there that has been ongoing over recent years. But I don't think, I suppose the short answer is, I don't think it'll have a major effect, but it certainly could have some effect.
Thank you. And then one for Duncan. On average, you're weaning 88 calves per 100 cows to the bull. Where are the other 12 going? Is it cow fertility or calf mortality? And if mortality, what is the most likely cause?
Generally speaking, I would say that other 12 is fertility. Again, like I say, we're a very tight calving period, so on average, over the last 5 or 6 years, we're generally around about 10% empty. So that would account for quite a large portion of that 12. Generally, mortality-wise, very low. We'd be running around probably, just off the top of my head, probably between 2 and 3% annually on just bits and bobs. Nothing major. We would have nothing. You don't get anything for free. So having a low-cost calving system, calving outside, you're going to have the odd stillborn calf and things like that. So we're not getting every single one weaned, but a lot of it would probably just be the fertility and a result of having the tight calving period.
You scan your cows for fertility. Do you identify twins at that stage? And if so, do you manage them differently?
We currently don't scan for twins, mainly just because we try and get a few jobs done at once where we have the vets to blood test and do our herd test at the same time. They're not able to scan for twins at the moment. So we don't, in terms of management wise, obviously we won't find out until they're born, but we try and run them on if we can and twin them on if there's any calf losses. But yeah, if the cow's capable of milking, then we'll just leave them on.
Right, thank you. Then going back to Phelim again, where are the new opportunities for beef exporting going forward? Or are there any new opportunities?
There's always opportunities, but in terms of, and sort of as I finished up in the presentation saying there, you know, the most valuable markets are the ones that we're closest to and the ones that we supply with most of our product to. UK, and Duncan's referred to it there as well, and he put it up very graphically on the screen. You know, highest value beef market. Mainland Europe then will follow pretty close behind that. Now, we had, and I know there's been huge effort made over the past decade to open markets and reopen markets in Asia and in North America. And there has been some business done there, but in truth it's been very, very small, and small both ways. And the reality, quite simply, is that we have the higher value markets on our doorstep. There will be some cuts, I'm sure, that can be sold in further away markets and byproducts, perhaps can go into Africa, places like that. But I don't foresee, certainly in the next 3 to 5 years, that there will be a major reorientation of where our beef's sold. I think the vast, vast majority of it will continue to be sold in GB and the rest in mainland Europe.
Thank you. One then for Mairead. We're finding a lot of coccidia in spring-born dairy heifer calves going to grass, even with proper venoxin health plan. How can we overcome this issue to enable grazing?
So the earlier the preventative program goes in, the better within reason, because they need exposure. So a lot of it is back to looking at stock and density and hygiene. It's very, very important. Using, I think was that a Vacoxin program, so there's a number of products, anticoccidials, that work quite well. Adding in some, and it does work, so there's essential oil and phytogenic type compounds into your feed, also give a lot of good gut support. And where I've seen really good benefits on a farm reported to me last year in a similar scenario. So it was some in-feed additives, so an algae-based product and an essential oil-based product. So I think the likes of Amiricox with albumin in feed, and it gives better gut integrity, better mucus production, protects the gut lining, and boosts the immune system. So those calves performed quite well. So it's looking a little bit differently and adding other things rather than standard drugs, and looking at our management practices where I find the biggest win. And then managing that transition at grass is maintaining them on those feed additives and making sure there's access to enough fibre when they do grow to grass.
Thank you. Then back to Duncan again. Do you find the Aberdeen Angus or the stabiliser cattle perform the best on your farm?
I wondered if that question might appear. I've been asked that quite a lot. Ultimately, they do the same job, really. You know, obviously there's quite a large portion of Angus in the stabiliser, so they do tick majority of the same boxes. We're probably a bit more focused on the Angus, probably realistically. We've been in that job for a lot longer time, and the market in our area is probably much better for Angus's. But yeah, stabilisers have done well for us. I mean, if you're splitting hairs, they'd probably be a little bit more terminally focused, having that continental element in them. But yeah, they're very much capable of doing the same job, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And another question for you, just how would you advise somebody who's an agricultural graduate looking to start their own beef enterprise? Where would you start them? Let's just assume they have a bit of land, but nothing else, just to start us off.
Well, I think the best thing is just to make the first step. I think the great thing now compared to when I started is that there's a bit more money in the job. However, the problem with that is that breeding stock's much more valuable, so you win and you lose. But I think the way I started was I bought generally mixed age to older cows with calves at foot, and what that did was I bought them this springtime and I stuck a bull in the summer. It was quite simple, and if they weren't in calf in the autumn, they just went down the road straight away. So I mean, you hadn't really lost a great deal. You paid for the value of the calf in the springtime, and you still had the calf. I think buying expensive bull and heifers, I think, would probably be a bit of a harder task because you have a lot more time involved getting a calf on the ground, more risk as well, being a young animal. And I think quite often middle-aged to older cows with calves at foot, they are simply valued just as a cull cow plus a calf, so they're quite easy to value. And if things don't work out right, then you're never normally too far away from, you haven't lost a great deal. So I think that would be quite a good place to start. But yeah, every year is different and every system's different.
Thank you. And one for you, Mairead. The last video showed rubber slats. Do you recommend them as a luxury? Sorry, would you consider them a luxury in respect of cow health or a must?
It depends on how long your housing period is. So if you have a predominantly an indoor system, I think they're a must. They're fantastic for comfort, they're fantastic for lameness reduction. They are terrible for you to walk across for herding because they're terribly slippery. So you need definitely good grippy wellies. But I think if you have a longer housing season where you're going to get value off them, I think they're a must.
Thank you. We have 2 roving mics, by the way. Is there anybody who doesn't use Slido has a question they'd like to ask? Yes, gentleman over here. And then there's one behind that again, in due course.
Hello, yeah, a simple question, nice and easy one for Phelim. Given world markets and whatnot, I'm assuming Brazil is the cheapest place to produce beef, but when you take into consideration the cost of production of the beef, the transport to our shores and possible tariffs, how much cheaper is Brazilian beef when it hits our supermarket shelves than locally produced beef?
Well, if we start off at the farm gate price, where it is run somewhere around half the price that it is here, or maybe even slightly less than that, we should also be aware that there's not global freight, whilst in the context of working it back to pence per kilo, isn't that exceptionally expensive. It's actually reasonable value there. So when it does hit the marketplace here, I don't have the exact answer to your question, but you can expect that it will be very noticeably cheaper at a retail end or in the food service sector, where it's more likely to be used than the domestically produced product. Very, very significantly cheaper is the way I'd put it. It is coming into the UK for the foreseeable future. It is going to be subject to the full tariff. Australian, New Zealand beef, and again, I'll piggyback on Duncan's slide here from earlier. You notice that it is significantly cheaper as well, though not as cheap as Brazil. That they come in with the benefit of having a zero tariff essentially on the product that come in, so therefore they are more competitive. Can't put an exact value on it, but it would be very noticeable.
There was another hand raised somewhere at the back there, if you can see them.
Norman.
2 tables behind where you were before.
Norman. Sorry, can I do this one first?
Oh, sorry.
Hello. I have a problem. I have an outlying farm with my neighbours is down with TB, and I cannot put my cattle on it. Every time I put my cattle on it, they come back with TB. And the only problem I can use my outlying farm is cut it for silage or graze it for sheep, and cannot let it to neighbouring farmers for cattle grazing. And TB is a big problem in some parts of Northern Ireland, which I've known some farmers have been caught 2 or 3 times with it, have decided to quit for a number of reasons. And we think the reason that the badger is coming in, going in, eating the feed stuff and urinating on the feed stuff, and cattle just transmitting it.
I think, Mairead, maybe that's questions directed to me, but are you TB? Or?
Yeah, I'd love to have the cure for TB. I don't. From what they've looked at, it's a significant problem in north and south, and there's certainly some hot pockets down beside me in Wicklow. From the experience, I suppose, in following back, badgers, deer, all are potential source, but animal movements seem to be coming through as one of the most significant causes of introduction into herds, and then animal-to-animal spread is the most significant factor in it spreading within the herd. So it's, unfortunately, I think it's a product of the type of management systems we have, where we have a lot of farms, closely beside each other, and a lot of animal movements as well. wildlife control, unfortunately, is out of my remit because they're protected animals and how we manage it. So whilst I can empathise, unfortunately, I can't offer you a huge amount of advice, I think.
Thank you. One last question, then we'll have to break for lunch.
Question for Duncan here. On your 770 odd acres, what way is the land tenure? Is it owned or leased, or what way is it?
Out of that 770, there's 110 that's owned in the family. It's been in the family for generations. That's sort of the owned base. There's 266 that's on a 10-year short-term limited duration tenancy. That's where we live. This year we took on what's called a secure tenancy in Scotland. I don't know if they exist here or not, but so they're basically a tenancy that you can't be evicted out of really, but we had to buy it. So that's another 164 acres. And in addition to that, we've also got around about 237 that's on a seasonal basis. So we've just sort of picked up a little bit here and there, but we're lucky in the area that we're in that there's quite a lot of rented farms. So when people come and go, it's easy for someone young to step in. But if they were all owned, you know, we just probably would struggle to have expanded that way.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, on your behalf, I'd like to thank our three speakers. Phelim we're very familiar with if we read the Irish Farmers Journal. Mairead's well known, particularly in South Down, where she was a veterinary surgeon for a long time. And to Duncan, who travelled over this morning, would you believe, in that bad weather, leaving his wife, who had a baby on Sunday, behind him. So we thank all three of them for their help. Maybe you'd show their appreciation.